Something interesting I found at the website Truthout, working age people living in states governed for the most part with Christian terrorist policies, or colloquially called conservative policies. Those people are more likely to die early than people in states with more left-leaning policies. That's a new study conducted by actuaries and they know, insurance companies, they know. And the results of this study corroborates observations and theories that that liberal or left-wing political commentators have maintained for years. I mean, you don't have to be a goddamn math whiz to take a look at the average life expectancy, say, in Massachusetts and compare it to Mississippi or Michigan and compare it to Alabama or Washington State and compare it to Georgia, and just look at the difference in the life expectancy numbers. You don't need a study to draw some fairly obvious conclusions, but this particular study was published this week in PLOS 1 and analyzed a whole bunch of policies relating to the criminal legal system, healthcare, taxes, climate, the environment, firearms, labor. And all of these aspects were rated between a 0 and a 1, where 0 is the maximum conservative score and 1 is the maximum left-leaning score. And the study compared those policies with mortality rates in a 20-year span between 1999 and 2019. And the authors found that the death rate among people between the ages of 25 and 64 in states with predominantly conservative policies, Christian terrorist policies, the death rate was higher than in states with predominantly liberal policies. And in nearly every policy area that the authors analyzed, left-leaning policies were associated with a lower rate of death. What is it? I mean, come on. What does this tell you? And most of these so-called conservative states that are run by the Christian terrorists are states that are just sucked into this vortex of Christian insanity, this blood cult of death and destruction and fiery hell and torture and pain. And then the kicker to this study, to me, is that the authors of the study found that if these so-called left-leaning policies went nationwide, especially in these red suckhole states, it would save thousands of lives. But the Christian terrorists don't believe in life. They believe in death. It's the gateway to their fucked up imaginary paradise. The authors of the study wrote this, quote, "Simulations indicate that changing all policy domains in all states to a fully liberal orientation might have saved, in the year 2019, 171,000 lives, while changing them to a fully conservative orientation would have cost 217,000 lives." So a difference there of almost 500,000 people who are dead because of these fucking Christian terrorists who didn't have to die. Not then. 500,000. 500,000. And according to the author of the article at Truthout, this research lends statistical evidence to what the left wing in this country has maintained for a lot of years, that left-leaning and leftist policies are not only a moral imperative, but in many cases, by design, saves lives. On the other hand, the Christian terrorist or the conservative policies are often designed to consolidate capital, money, and help corporations and the wealthy hoard ever more money and power. Well, I'm going over this with you. I want you to think Elon Musk, because I want to talk about that in a second. And the policies of the Christian terrorists, which are designed to consolidate capital and help corporations hoard and individual billionaires hoard more money and power, it all comes with devastating human consequences. The proof is there for anyone who wants to see it. It's obvious to people like you, to people like me. The lead study author is a woman named Jennifer Montez, a sociology professor at Syracuse University. She said, quote, "If a state policymaker were to say to me, it's unfair to criticize my state because I have a low-educated, low-income population, I would ask them, why do you have a low-educated, low-income population? And the answer is because it's the fault of your policy environment," end quote. And the co-author of this report is Stephen Wolfe. He's Director Emeritus of the Center on Society and Health at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond. And he said that the study showed that higher mortality was associated with policies helping the private sector to thrive in hopes that the economic gains would trickle down to those who need more assistance. How long have we heard this bullshit? 48 years now? Now, the study found particularly strong links in certain areas. For example, quoting from the study, between the gun safety domain and suicide mortality among men, between the labor domain and alcohol-induced mortality, and between both the economic tax and tobacco tax domains and cardiovascular mortality. So the less gun safety, the more suicide. The less organized labor, the more alcohol-induced mortality. The improper economic taxing and the tobacco taxes, more heart attacks. Now, the authors say that the research is especially relevant because the life expectancy rate is far lower in the United States than it is in other so-called wealthy countries. In 2019, U.S. life expectancy was 78 years, which is almost 6 years lower than Japan, 3 years lower than in Canada, 2.5 years lower than in the UK. And the study shows that conservative policies, Christian terrorist policies, are to blame for the U.S.'s relatively poor life expectancy. And the authors of the study also say that the spread of these conservative policies across the country is contributing to a lower life expectancy for the United States as a whole. And the truth is, other studies have corroborated this claim. One study found that life expectancy in the United States could increase by almost 4 years if the country adapted more generous social policies, which means more policies being put out in the social realm by Democrats, by liberals, by lefties, by people like you and me. I wonder why the results of this study and other studies similar to it that show how so-called conservative policies, and they're not conservative, they're destructive, they're horrifying, they're Christian terrorism. Why those policies and the different results in life expectancy that arise from those policies, why that doesn't become a political ad blanketing this country for the Democratic Party. I mean, I would assume that even the Christian terrorists, although they talk about Jesus, I'm going to heaven, all this other horse shit, I don't think very many of them really want to die. Have you ever noticed that? As soon as they get sick or they get gunshot wounded or whatever, they start begging for mommy and Jesus. Oh, I don't want to die. Don't let me die. No, please, don't let me die. Well, why not? You want to go to heaven, don't you? Well, that's the doorway through which you have to pass, fool. You have to die. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcasts. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.